The camera opens on absolute white. Snow pelts the lens, wind screaming like a siren. In the middle of nowhere, four dark specks move forward in single file, roped together. Ethan, Maya, Cole, and Grant. Helmets glazed in ice, masks rimmed with crystals. Their headlamps shake and slash through the fog like dull blades. Close on their feet, crampons biting into the ice. One step, another. The metallic clink echoes. The camera tilts up to Maya's face. Red eyes, frozen lashes. Her hand clamps the carabiner, checking the rope. Grant points his arm upward, signaling forward. Ethan flashes a quick gesture. Keep moving. Cole adjusts the oxygen tank. The hiss floods the audio. The score drops out. All that's left is a sharp crack from above, like a sheet of glass splitting. The camera swings to the ridge. A dark line opens on the slope. 1 second of silence. And then the world gives way. A wall of snow and rock collapses, swallowing the sky. The camera shakes violently. The roar of the avalanche smothers everything. The rope snaps tight like a whip and drags all four. Tight shot. Ethan's glove scrapes the ice, trying to break. Maya spins, slams into the white wall. Cole vanishes into a cloud, swallowed whole. Grant is thrown. His leg catches in the rope, his body flipping upside down. The avalanche barrels past like a train. When the sound dies down, a crushing silence remains, cut only by the faint beep of an oximeter. The camera finds Ethan alone, half buried, his chest rising and falling in spasms. He digs with his hands, dark blood staining the snow. He yanks the rope. Nothing. He yanks again, a torn scrap of fabric. He stands. His headlamp sweeps the slope and reveals 3 tracks in the snow ending in 3 different places. 3 stillnesses. 3 silences. Cut to days later. A helicopter slices through a blue sky. The camera zooms in on Ethan's face, frost-burned, shaking, clipped to the line. Below Everest falls away, and in the snow 3 dark points don't move anymore. Before we begin, take a deep breath and pay attention to what you're about to see, because this story isn't about reaching the summit. It's about the exact second the mountain decides who keeps existing and who becomes part of the silence. Picture the camera catching a face coated in ice, skin split by the cold, eyes burning like they're full of sand. Picture stiff gloves, almost rigid, trying to do simple things. Clip a carabiner, pull a rope, adjust a mask, like every movement costs minutes of life. Now picture that same face looking down and not seeing anyone answering anymore. Everest is beautiful in photos, but when the wind rises and the visibility disappears, it doesn't feel like a place. It feels like a machine, an endless white corridor where the sound of your own blood in your ears becomes the soundtrack. And when something breaks up there, a sharp crack, short, impossible to ignore, there's no time to think. There's only your body, muscle, instinct, and a silent terror, because even screaming burns too much oxygen. This story begins with 4 Americans, Ethan, Maya, Cole, and Grant. 4 different faces, 4 different ways of moving, 4 different breathing rhythms, but one single rope connecting all of them. A rope that, for a while, means safety, and then, in 1 second, becomes a sentence. You're going to see their line pushing through the blizzard like cut-out shadows. You're going to see headlamps trembling, weak light slicing through nothingness. You're going to hear crampons biting ice with that metallic sound that echoes like the mountain is listening. You're going to see quick hand signals, gear adjustments, counted steps, and then the brutal shift. The sound drops out, like someone turned the world off. And then the moment everything turns into violence, the crack opening across the slope, the white splitting, the mountain releasing the full weight of a killing avalanche. You're going to see the rope snap tight like a whip. You're going to see bodies ripped off the ground. You're going to see a glove scraping the ice, trying to slow the inevitable. You're going to see someone disappear inside a white cloud as if they never existed. You're going to see another flip upside down, caught by the leg, swinging in the void. And after the roar passes, the silence, just a faint beep, a warning that someone is still there, for now. And here's the part nobody likes to talk about when they talk about exploration. Surviving isn't a happy ending. It's carrying what was left behind. It's going home with your body alive and everything else, shattered in invisible pieces. It's watching Everest shrink on the horizon while down below, 3 dark points don't move anymore. So I want to ask you a question before we drop into this story. If you were tied to 3 other people by one rope, and the mountain started to collapse, would you pull? Would you cut? Would you let go? Or would you try to save everyone, even knowing it could kill you too? If you're into survival, exploration, and split-second decisions, the kind that feel like they're happening in real time, go ahead and subscribe now, because this is where we tell stories that make you feel the cold on your skin. And drop a comment. What city and country are you watching from? I want to see where in the world you're joining from to follow this journey. Now kill the distractions, turn the volume up, because the next image is absolute white, and 4 shadows moving straight into the zone almost nobody comes back from. The story you're about to hear is a completely fictional narrative created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real events or real people is purely coincidental. The wind on Everest doesn't blow, it shoves. It slams into your body like invisible hands trying to rip away every last bit of warmth you have left. The snow doesn't fall from above. It comes sideways, scrapes your face, slips through the gaps in your layers, and sticks to your goggles until it turns into a white crust. In the middle of that nothing, 4 Americans moved forward in single file, tied to the same rope. Ethan led. Tall, athletic, short dark beard, a red parka with black details, the only living color in that washed-out world. The headlamp on his helmet trembled with every step. He didn't talk much. He just raised his hand when he wanted everyone to stop, and everyone stopped. Behind him came Maya, black, 31, braids tucked tight under her hood, navy parka. Her eyes were red from the cold and the wind, and her lashes had already turned into tiny white needles of ice. She kept her body pitched forward, like she was fighting the air itself. Cole was third, lighter than Ethan, but carrying the weight of the oxygen tank on his back, grey parka, face pale beneath the mask. The regulator hose bounced, and the hiss of oxygen was constant, like a snake breathing right next to his ear. Grant brought up the rear. 41, tall, weathered face, scruffy beard, black parka. He planted his trekking pole into the ice before each step, searching for stability. He was the kind of man who didn't waste energy on words, but when he spoke, everyone listened. Every meter the ground changed. Sometimes it was hard-packed snow, sometimes blue ice, smooth as glass. The crampons bit and released with a dry, repetitive metallic sound, echoing under the wind. It was a sound that reminded you that any mistake up there wouldn't be a slip. It would be a fall with no end. Ethan raised his fist, closing his hand in the air. All 4 stopped at the same time. The rope went taut between their bodies. "Check rope," he said, his voice muffled by the mask. Maya tugged the carabiner and tested the gate with a firm squeeze. The metal made a short click. She held up 2 fingers. Okay. Cole checked the knot on his harness and gave the rope a quick jerk. The tank bounced against his back. He lifted a thumbs up. Grant just nodded and tightened his grip on the pole. "Good. Keep it tight," Grant said. Ethan turned forward again and opened his hand. "Move." The line started up again. They entered a darker strip of ice, too smooth, angled, the surface reflecting light like it was wet. Ethan tested it with the tip of his pole and heard the sound no one wants to hear in the mountains, solid, but with a faint hollow echo, like there was air beneath the slab. "One at a time. Slow. No gaps," he warned. Maya crossed first, knees low, short steps. When she reached the other side, she leaned back into the rope with her body, locking the line. Cole went next, the weight of the tank trying to pull him backward. The slab cracked under his boot, a sharp little snap, and his whole body froze for half a second until he made it across. Grant crossed last, using the pole as a third point of contact, unhurried, no drama. On the far side, they reformed the line. The fog thickened. The world shrank. Nothing existed beyond the beam of their headlamps and the sound of their own gear. When the wind hit harder, it felt like the air ripped your voice out of your throat before it could even become a word. Ethan pointed forward without stopping. "Keep moving. Don't stop here." They pushed on. Maya blinked slowly, and a tear slid from the corner of her eye, freezing almost instantly. She wiped it with the back of her glove without taking her eyes off the ground. Cole tugged at his mask to get a better seal, and the oxygen hiss spiked louder for a second. Grant glanced left. just enough to check the edge of the slope. There was no view out there, only a white drop with no reference point. He snapped his eyes back to the line. "Watch your left," he warned. Ethan motioned to close the spacing. The rope sagged less between them. The snow deepened. Their legs sank to mid-shin and the sound of their steps changed. The scrape of metal on ice disappeared, replaced by a muffled crunch, like stepping on packed sugar. The wind erased their tracks almost as fast as they made them. Ethan stopped again, turning his head back. "Maya, you good?" She lifted her thumb. Her hand was shaking, but the gesture was solid. "I'm good. Keep going." Ethan looked to Cole. "O2's steady," Cole answered, clipped. Grant added without asking for space. "We keep the rope tight. No slack." "No slack," Ethan confirmed. They moved a few more meters. That's when Everest changed its mood. It wasn't a boom. It wasn't a clear warning. It was something strange, almost imperceptible. The wind, which had been screaming, seemed to drop suddenly, like someone shut a door on the world. The snow in the air stopped cutting sideways and began to fall straighter, slower. Ethan noticed first. His body reacted before his mind did. He stopped mid-step. Maya stopped. Cole stopped. Grant stopped. The rope went still, stretched like a line drawn across emptiness. Then the sound came. A dry crack, too loud to be ordinary ice. Crack! Grant lifted his chin, trying to see above the fog. "Did you hear that?" Ethan raised a hand for silence. "Quiet. Listen." The world shrank again, but for a different reason. Every sound felt like a threat. Their breathing grew louder. Cole's oxygen hiss became the dominant noise, and then above them, the mountain answered with another crack. Two, almost back-to-back. Crack. Crack. A dark line appeared high on the slope. A brand new scar, hair-thin, that hadn't been there minutes ago. It started to grow slowly, like someone was pulling a thread from inside the snow. Maya clenched her carabiner on instinct, like that could hold the world together. Cole took an involuntary step back, and the tank swung. He grabbed his mask hard. Grant drove his pole into the ice, and the vibration climbed up his arm. "Move! Now!" Grant shouted. Ethan didn't argue. He pointed forward with his whole arm, pure command. "Go! Go! Keep moving!" The line burst into motion. It wasn't running. It was the fastest speed possible on that ice. Short steps, quick, hard, shoulders low, bodies pitched forward, crampons biting and throwing up sparks of ice. The rope snapped tight. The tension traveled from person to person like an electric jolt. Up above, the crack opened a little wider. The edge of the snow lifted like it was breathing, and for 1 second, everything went absurdly silent. Total silence, as if Everest was holding its breath to choose the exact moment. And then at the top the white began to move, at first slowly. Then all at once a massive slab giving way, the mountain finally letting its weight go. Ethan took 2 more steps, hauling the line. Maya closed in behind him. Cole fought not to fall back with the tank swinging. Grant kept the rope tight from the rear, trying to keep anyone from getting slack, and the sound of the world came roaring back with the avalanche, a deep, growing rumble charging straight at them. The chapter ends on the instant the snow up top begins to come down for real, and the 4 of them understand, without needing words, that there is no plan now. Only survival. The rumble came before the impact, a low sound rising fast, like the mountain had switched on an engine behind the sky. The crack up high was no longer a line, it was an open mouth. The lip of the snow finally gave way and started sliding down in layers, shoving everything in its path. "Go, go!" Ethan shouted, and his voice almost vanished inside the noise. He dropped his center of gravity and sped up the only way he could. There was no room to truly run, only to shorten his steps and raise the pace without losing traction. The red of his parka cut through the fog like an emergency flare. Maya stayed glued to him. The wind hit her face like sandpaper. She kept her arms slightly out for balance, knees bent low, breathing hard inside her mask. Her eyes were wide, shining, and her frozen lashes snapped into tiny pieces when she blinked. Cole tried to keep up, but the oxygen tank seemed to drag him backward with every step. He held the hose tight to his chest so it wouldn't smack the ice, and the hiss of the regulator blended with the avalanche's roar. Tsh! Tsh! a fragile sound, trying to survive inside something monstrous. Grant was last, and the avalanche had a cruel logic. It reaches the one closest to it first. He planted his pole once, twice, searching for traction. The tip skidded on a slick plate. He corrected the angle and drove it in again, hard, the vibration traveling up his entire arm. "Tight rope, no slack," he shouted. Ethan answered without looking back, just a sharp, violent hand motion. "Tight!" The rope between them wasn't a comforting link anymore. It was a line of force stretched and vibrating, transmitting every stumble from one person to the next. The fog thickened and visibility dropped to just a few yards. Everything outside the headlamp beams was nothing. The avalanche grew too fast. The first effect wasn't snow swallowing their legs, it was the air. A pressure wave shoved the world. Maya slipped half a step, her body dropped into a controlled fall, her knee almost kissing the ice, and she recovered by grabbing the rope with her free hand. The move yanked the entire line. Ethan felt the tension and adjusted his stride without stopping. Cole lost his grip for a moment when the wind exploded from behind. The tank swung and pulled his torso sideways. He clamped a hand over his mask, like it might rip loose, and tried to reset his foot. The ice cracked under his crampon. He recovered, but the gap between him and Maya widened for 1 second. Grant got shoved out of line. Blown snow slammed into him like an invisible wall. He stabbed his pole down to keep from falling and fought his way back behind the line, breathing short. His face was raw red, his scruffy beard now crusted with ice, eyes squinted hard, trying to see what was already coming. The roar grew louder. It wasn't in the distance anymore. It was on top of them. It was in them. And then the rope snapped with a brutal jerk like a whip. Grant felt it first. The ground behind him turned into something that moved. He tried to plant his feet, but the ice became a conveyor belt. The pole ripped out of his hand and disappeared into the white. His body was yanked backward, and the shout he let out was swallowed instantly. Maya felt the rope pulling from behind. Her body was thrown forward, then snapped back like she was tied to a giant elastic band. She flung her arms out, trying to balance, but the ground wasn't ground anymore. It was a living mass of snow running. Cole was hit by a dense cloud. For a second he was still there, then half there, then almost gone. The only thing clearly visible was the outline of the tank appearing and disappearing. He raised an arm to shield his face. His glove went into the white and didn't come back out. Up front, Ethan did the only thing he could do. He dropped low and tried to brake. He slammed his hand onto the ice, fingers spread, and dragged his glove hard. The contact tore the surface, shattered crystals, and sprayed shards behind him. His whole arm shook. The red parka whipped in the wind. But he held on like he could stop a mountain with the palm of his hand. The rope yanked again. Ethan's body slid backward, centimeters, then more, like someone had pulled a rug out from under him. He tried to dig in with his crampons, but the avalanche wasn't passing. It was taking everything. Maya spun. She lost her axis when the rope pulled one way and the snow pushed the other. Her body rotated and her shoulder slammed into a wall of compacted snow. Her head snapped to the side, and for a split second the headlamp on her helmet drew an arc of light. A bright curve carved into the white, before it vanished. Cole disappeared for good. It wasn't that he fell. He blinked out. 1 second he was a person. The next there was only snow where he had been. The tank vanished like the mountain had closed its fist over him. Grant reappeared for an instant, thrown hard. His leg snagged the rope and his body flipped upside down. He swung, arms reaching, trying to find ice, trying to find anything. His mouth was open in a silent scream, and his wide eyes reflected the trembling beam of a headlamp. He swung once, twice, and then he was swallowed again by another wave of white. The roar owned everything. There was no direction anymore, no up, no down, only impact, vibration, and a constant force driving forward. Snow hammered their faces, forced itself into seams, crushed. The sound was so loud it felt physical. And then, as fast as it arrived, the avalanche began to pass. The roar pulled away like a train leaving. The wind returned in a different form, a distant whisper. Snow started to fall slowly, settling. The world went silent again. A heavy silence. For a few seconds there was nothing but the soft settling of snow and the faint noises of their gear. Then came the beep. 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 distant, weak, almost ridiculous after what had just happened, but stubborn, like a warning. Someone was still there. Ethan emerged half-buried. His chest rose and fell in spasms. He coughed, dragged air in with difficulty, and his breath came out thick and white. His face was coated in ice and small, dark smears. His right glove was stained with blood mixed into snow. He dug with his hands, not carefully, desperately, throwing snow aside in short, brutal motions. Each pull made his glove scrape hard ice. He found the rope and yanked. Nothing. He yanked again. The rope shifted a little, then jammed. A torn piece of fabric appeared snagged in the strands, trembling in the wind, frozen edges, fibers frayed. Ethan went still for 1 second, holding it like it was an answer. His hand clenched the rope until the glove wrinkled. He pulled one more time just to be sure. Nothing. The beep kept going. Faint, somewhere in the equipment. Ethan crawled out of the snow, shoved himself up to his knees, then rose, staggering. His headlamp swept the slope. 3 tracks in the snow, 3 directions, and at the end of each one a dark point, motionless. Ethan took 1 step forward, red against white, and the wind started up again, like the mountain was ready to keep going. The wind came back in waves, but the avalanche's roar was gone. What remained was worse, an enormous, heavy silence where any small sound felt like it was screaming. Ethan stood there swaying, his red parka smeared with snow and dark stains. The headlamp on his helmet swept the ground in short, trembling motions. The rope, now half buried and glazed with ice, dragged behind him. 3 marks in the snow, 3 different paths, 3 dark points at the end of each track. He took 2 steps and stopped. His chest rose and fell too fast. His mask hissed when he pulled air. The faint beep from his gear cut through the silence at irregular intervals. Ethan raised his voice, even knowing the fog swallowed everything. "Maya, Cole, Grant." Nothing answered, only wind. He crouched and yanked the rope hard to pull the line closer. The ice stuck to it, snapped. He wrapped 2 turns around his forearm so it wouldn't drag as much, and chose the nearest track, the one that ran diagonally down and ended at a larger, dark shape. He started walking. Every step was a test. The ice was still treacherous, and his crampons were packed with stuck snow. Ethan stomped his boot now and then to knock the ice free from the metal teeth. Tack, tack. The sound felt way too loud in that emptiness. As he got close to the first dark point, he knew what it was before he reached it. A black, rigid shape, half buried. Grant. The black parka showed like a hole in the snow. One arm was bent at the wrong angle. His helmet slumped to the side, ice built up along the rim. The mask sat crooked, and his unshaven beard was crusted with crystals. Ethan stopped a yard away. His hand hovered in the air for a moment, like it was asking permission to touch. Then he dropped to his knees. His knee sank and the snow gave with a dry crunch. He pressed 2 fingers to the side of Grant's neck beneath the mask, searching for a pulse. He stayed there too long. Nothing. Ethan pulled his hand back. His glove trembled. The wind lifted a thin veil of snow that drifted over Grant's face, wiping away small details, like the mountain wanted to cover everything again. Ethan tried to speak, low and direct, like an order, like it was still a team drill. "Grant." Nothing. He leaned into the carabiner on Grant's harness. The rope was still clipped there, frozen into the gate. Ethan blew warm breath onto the metal, rubbed with his gloved thumb, forced it. The metal fought him. He forced again. Clack. The gate popped open. The rope released with a small snap and dropped into the snow, heavy, stiff. Ethan held the rope for a second like he didn't want to let it fall. Then he let go. He stood slowly, body rigid, and took a step back. The beep from his own gear returned, more insistent. He smacked the side of his regulator and yanked his mask into place. The hiss steadied for a few seconds. Ethan looked toward the other 2 tracks. The beam of his headlamp shook. He breathed hard and started walking again, dragging the rope. The second track was longer, like it had been dragged by a wave that lost strength. It ran downhill and curved slightly before vanishing into thicker fog. Ethan moved slowly, but he didn't stop. The wind hit his body and made his hood buzz and flutter. Halfway there, he slipped half a step. His body tipped, his free hand opened in the air searching for balance, and he drove his boot down hard. The crampon bit the ice with a metallic scrape, and he recovered. The movement tugged the rope and it slid across the ground, scoring the snow. When the beam found navy blue, Ethan sped up. Maya was on her side, half buried. Her navy parka looked darker than before, like moisture and ice had sucked the color out. Her helmet was still on, headlamp dead, goggles clouded with crystals. A few ends of her braids had slipped free from the hood and were fused in ice. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her and started tearing snow away with both hands. Hard, repetitive movements, like he was digging a path with anger. He cleared her shoulder, cleared part of her torso, tried to open space near her chest. "Maya! Maya! Maya!" he shouted louder. Nothing. He leaned close to her mask, searching for any sign of fogged breath. There was none. He ran a hand along her arm and tried to turn her gently. Her body shifted heavy, unresponsive. The position wouldn't change right. The snow around her felt like it was holding everything in place. Ethan pressed his hand to her neck and stayed there, frozen. The wind passed over them and lifted flakes that drifted into the opening he'd dug. Nothing. The silence was so complete that Ethan's oxygen hiss sounded like the only living noise on that section of the mountain. He went to the carabiner on Maya's harness. The metal was sheathed in ice. He blew on it, rubbed, forced it. Once, twice, 3 times. Clack. Free. The rope dropped into the snow beside her body and curled in a short, rigid loop. Ethan stayed crouched for a second, his head bowed, but it wasn't slow or dramatic. It was his body begging for air, begging for strength. His hand clenched the rope without realizing it. Then he stood up all at once. Like standing still was dangerous. 1 track left, the farthest one, the one that disappeared into fog that looked thicker than the rest. Ethan started moving faster. His steps turned short and urgent. The rope dragged behind him and slapped the ice now and then. The wind shoved his body and he went anyway, shoulders low, chin forward. The oxygen sound changed. The hiss went uneven for a moment, and the beep came back. Ethan smacked the regulator and yanked the mask connection hard. The hiss steadied again, but the beep kept insisting in intervals. "Come on," he muttered, not like a thought, but like force in his body, like someone shoving their own breathing forward. When his headlamp caught the outline of the oxygen tank half buried, Ethan practically threw himself to the ground. Cole was there. The grey parka showed in patches, the rest covered by compacted snow. The tank sat crooked, one strap loose. The regulator hose was visible and still connected to the mask. Ice had built up along the rim of his helmet, and his goggles were smeared with snow. Ethan dug, fast, throwing snow aside. His glove hit something hard, compacted ice, and he forced it, breaking it into chunks. The dry crack of ice splitting echoed low. "Cole!" he shouted. "Cole!" Nothing. He cleared Cole's face enough to see the mask. He leaned in, almost touching, searching for vapor. There was none. Ethan pressed 2 fingers to Cole's neck, feeling for a pulse. He went still. His arm shook. The wind hit the side of his helmet. Nothing. He tugged the regulator hose, checking if it was seated. The tank gave a hollow little knock when a loose strap slapped it. Ethan's hand slid to the harness gate and found the carabiner. The rope was still clipped there, frozen like a sentence. He blew warm breath onto the metal, rubbed hard, forced it. The gate resisted. "Please," he breathed, low, and forced again. Clack. It opened. The rope was free for the 3rd time. For a few seconds, Ethan stayed kneeling beside Cole, breathing short and hard. His chest rose and fell in jolts. The headlamp trembled, and the beam danced over his friend's motionless face. Fine snow kept drifting down and settling on everything, like the mountain was closing the scene. Ethan stood with effort. He wrapped the rope around his forearm tighter. Then he grabbed the radio clipped to his chest strap. A small device crusted in ice, 1 big button and a short antenna. He pressed it. "Mayday, Mayday. This is climber Ethan. Everest Ridge. Avalanche. 3 down. I'm alone." He waited. Only wind hiss and static. He pressed again, harder, like the button needed to feel urgency. "Mayday! Do you copy?" Nothing. Just static. Ethan shoved the radio back with a stiff motion and lifted his gaze, trying to find any reference point. But there were no flags. No signs, no clean trail. Up here, Everest was a corridor with no shape. He took 3 steps and almost went down. His body felt too heavy for its own balance. He braced a hand on his knee and dragged in air. His breath came out in short bursts. The beep grew more frequent. Ethan raised an arm and slapped the side of his tank like he could scare the warning into silence. Then he adjusted his mask and looked around. The wind was building. The fog thickened. He walked away from the bodies, not from coldness, from physical need. Because staying there, standing still, was letting the mountain win slowly. With every step, the 3 dark points slipped behind him, one by one, until they were just stains in the white, then nothing. The navy vanished first. The grey disappeared right after. The black was eaten by wind, like it had never existed. Only the red kept moving. Ethan headed toward what looked like a higher line of ground, where the wind felt slightly different. He moved carefully, testing each ice plate before shifting his weight. Sometimes he stomped to knock snow free from his crampons. Other times, he put a hand on the ice for balance, but he avoided leaving his glove pressed there too long, because the cold made the material go rigid. He tried the radio again. "Mayday. I'm moving. I'm moving. Only static." The wind rose and brought snow again, slapping his goggles and sticking to the edges. Ethan wiped with the back of his glove, but the crust came right back. His body shook visibly, not for drama, but from the failure of his own heat. At one point he stopped and set his hands on his hips, trying to steady his breathing. The beep kept insisting. He fiddled with the regulator. The hiss changed slightly, then returned. The fog split for half a second and revealed something that looked like a drop on the left, an endless void. Ethan froze instantly and stepped the other way, hugging the center of the route. He drove his boot down hard and kept going. He shouted again, pure sound thrown into the white. "Hello!" The wind swallowed it. Ethan took a few more meters and stopped again, his body pitched forward like he was carrying an invisible weight. He tapped his carabiner against the ice twice. Tock, tock, a weak signal, almost childish against the immensity. Nothing answered. He adjusted his headlamp, widened the beam to light a bigger area. The light cut through the fog and came back without finding anything but dancing particles. The beep grew louder. Ethan looked at the gauge, fumbled with stiff gloves, and the sound dropped for an instant. He breathed with more effort, like sucking air through a straw. His body wavered, and he braced on his knee again. Then a different sound arrived. Not avalanche, not wind. A distant, heavy, rhythmic thump, like enormous drum beats in the sky. Thump, thump, thump. Ethan snapped his head up. His body went still for a second, like he didn't want to lose the sound. He yanked the radio up, pressed the button. I hear you, this is Ethan." Static answered, but the thumping kept going, far away. Thump, thump. The wind at ground level started to shift. The snow around his boots began to spin in small eddies, not like regular gusts, but like air being pulled from above. Ethan raised an arm. The other hand held the coiled rope. He stood there shaking, but steady enough to be seen. "Here!" he screamed, voice scraped raw. The sound grew a little, still distant. The fog started to move differently, like it was being pushed. And then, for a brief moment, a dark point appeared above the white. Small, but real. A helicopter, still far away, cutting through the haze. Ethan waved his arm higher, trying to stand out in the emptiness. The red of his parka finally mattered. He took a step forward and almost fell. He caught himself with a harsh movement, drove his boot into the ice and lifted his arm again. "Here, please." The dark point grew slowly, and the sound got louder. The snow on the ground began to spin in faster spirals, throwing up white dust around his legs. Ethan kept his arm raised, his body shaking, his face crusted in ice, eyes locked on the sky like he couldn't afford to blink. The rotor made the air vibrate. The noise swallowed everything, and still, Everest was too big. The fog was too thick. The helicopter was still far. Ethan stood there alone, a red dot in the white, while the sound came closer without promising anything. The chapter ends with the rotor growing and the snow whipping around him, like one last test before rescue. The sound of the helicopter grew, but it didn't arrive as immediate relief. It came first as a threat, The air vibrating, snow spinning around Ethan's boots, the wind changing direction without asking permission. The rotor felt like it was slicing the mountain into invisible pieces. Ethan kept his arm raised, the red parka shuddering like a wild flag. He blinked slowly, because every blink glued ice to his lashes. His breathing came out short and raw, like his throat had turned into torn paper. The beep from his gear kept coming in quick intervals, relentless. The dark speck in the sky got bigger. The fog shifted in waves. For 1 second, the helicopter vanished into the white, and Ethan felt his entire body lock up. He didn't move. He didn't lower his arm. He didn't look anywhere else. He just stood there like turning his head could make it disappear. The sound returned even louder. Snow tore off the ground with force. Tiny grains hammered Ethan's chest and face like shrapnel. He turned his face slightly so he wouldn't take it full on, but he kept his eyes on the sky. The silhouette of the helicopter emerged again, clearer now, the skids visible beneath. The dark fuselage cut against a weak blue that flickered behind the haze. Ethan shouted, more reflex than hope. "Here!" His own voice barely existed. The rotor swallowed it. The helicopter hovered lower and held position for a few seconds, fighting air currents that shoved the aircraft's body around. The mountain didn't make it easy. Everest looked like it was trying to rip the rescue out of the sky. A cable started to drop. Ethan took a step forward and almost went down again, his body heavy and unstable. He threw his arms out on instinct to balance, and the rope coiled around his forearm slipped a little. His right glove, still stained with blood, clamped the ice hard. He drove his crampons in, breathed short, and got back upright. The cable dropped farther. It swung, pulled by wind and rotor wash, back and forth like a dangerous pendulum. Ethan tried to move closer, but each step felt like negotiating with the ground. He advanced slowly, choosing the firmest spots between ice plates and packed snow. The rotor's vibration thudded in his chest. Fog spun in spirals around his legs. The hook dipped near, but not near enough. It swung past a few yards out of reach, and the wind shoved it away again. Ethan stretched his arm as far as he could. The fingers inside his glove opened and closed on air, trying to grab nothing. The hook fled like it was afraid of him. He lunged another step, too fast, and slipped. His knee hit the ice and scraped hard. Pain shot up his leg, but there wasn't time to react. He shoved himself back up, shaking, and caught the cable with his left hand at the last second. The cold metal burned through the glove. Ethan held on. The cable yanked his arm upward, and his body almost went with it. He grabbed with both hands and pulled the cable toward him, controlling the swing. His breathing turned into a series of short, violent hits. From the other side, a voice came through the radio, distorted by wind, but clear enough to be human. "Ethan! Clip in! Clip in now!" He didn't answer with words. He answered with movement. He let the rope slip off his forearm, grabbed the carabiner on his harness, and tried to latch it onto the hook on the cable. The thick gloves fought him. The carabiner was stiff, frozen. The tremor in his hands made the connection miss. He tried again. The cable swung. The hook rose a few inches. Ethan held on with one hand and forced the carabiner with the other, crushing the gate with his thumb. No click. The voice on the radio repeated, sharper, "Clip in, you have to clip in." Ethan slammed the carabiner against the hook, caught the tip, and forced the gate with everything he had. Clack. The sound was small, but it was the most important sound in the world. Ethan held still for a second, like he didn't believe it. Then he yanked the cable hard to test it. It held. The helicopter began to rise, slowly. Ethan's body lifted off the ground. First a few inches, then a foot. His boots swung in the air. The void opened beneath him, white and endless. He clenched both hands around the harness and closed his eyes for a split second, like the light and wind were too much. It wasn't rest. It was pure reflex. The helicopter gained altitude. The fog started to fall below him and the world opened just a little more, and then came the detail that cut deeper than the cold. As Ethan rose, he saw the tracks again. 3 marks pulling away, 3 dark points separated, motionless. They weren't far away. They were right below him, like Everest wanted to force him to look until the end. Ethan's body tightened, even while he hung there. He turned his face downward. Rotor wash slapped his hood against his cheek. His goggles went wet with melt that refroze instantly. He didn't say names. He didn't give a speech. He just looked. The helicopter climbed higher, and the points began to shrink into stains. The white around them swallowed everything. Every second, the mountain swallowed a little more. The voice came again, calmer now, operational. "We have you. Stay still. Don't fight the cable." Ethan obeyed. His body shook. His legs kicked involuntarily. He gripped the harness like it was the last real thing in the world. When they reached the door, a hand appeared. Thick glove, strong arm, pulling the cable in, guiding Ethan. The aircraft bucked in the currents. Snow surged up, slapped the metal, vanished. Ethan bumped the skid for a second and nearly slipped. The rescuer grabbed his shoulder and hauled hard. "Pull! Pull!" Ethan tried to help, but his body didn't respond right. He lifted one leg, then the other. The crampons clanged sharply on the metal. He slid inside, half-dragged, and collapsed sitting on the floor. The door pulled mostly shut. The rotor still thundered, but muffled now. Inside, the sound changed. Equipment, voices, engine, the air vibrating. Ethan sat against the wall, hands still locked on his harness like they couldn't let go. His mask was crusted in ice. A rescuer crouched in front of him and eased the mask down carefully. The cold air inside felt warm compared to outside. Ethan's face was exposed. Skin blotched raw red. His nose looked burned, lips split. His short beard had ice clinging to the tips. His eyes were too wide, like they'd forgotten how to close. The rescuer spoke near his ear, loud enough to cut through the noise. "Stay with me, blink, blink." Ethan blinked. Once, twice. Slow. Like his body was relearning simple movements. Another rescuer draped a thermal blanket over him. The material flashed light and fluttered. Ethan grabbed it without realizing, gripping hard like it was a rope. "Where are the others?" someone asked. The voice sounded practical, but Ethan heard it like a punch. He turned his head toward the door, toward the white outside, like they might come running out of the snow any second. They didn't. Ethan spoke low, his voice broken. "3. Down." The rescuer nodded. No debate. Just a quick look to the pilot. Then back to Ethan. The helicopter started to pull away from the pickup point, gaining altitude. Ethan, still sitting, leaned slightly to look down through the opening. Below, Everest looked like a map of white and grey. And the 3 dark points, smaller now, were still there. Still, separate, like marks left by an accident no one can erase. The helicopter climbed higher, and the points became almost nothing. Ethan tightened his grip on the blanket and closed his eyes for 2 seconds, not crying, locking, like someone trying to hold their body together so it wouldn't splinter. When he opened his eyes, the cabin was full of vibration and light. One rescuer adjusted something on the radio. Another checked a cylinder. A third watched the window, tracking the wind. Ethan tried to pull off his right glove. It was stiff and stuck with dried blood and ice. He tugged until his fingers came free. The skin of his hand was red and scored. He stared at it for a second, then closed his fist, like he didn't want to see it. The helicopter flew for long minutes, cutting through fog and then into cleaner air. The light changed. The blue of the sky deepened. The white of Everest sharpened. And still, nothing looked beautiful. Everything felt too far away. When they landed, the ground was solid, and there were people, lots of voices. Ethan was guided out carefully, supported by 2 rescuers, one on each side. His legs shook and failed. He didn't fall because they held him. They took him into an enclosed area where the air didn't slice like a blade. They removed his helmet, his goggles. The light felt aggressive. His face tightened. A medical team talked fast, but the words came as noise. What mattered were the motions, hands steadying him, the blanket being adjusted, equipment being swapped. Ethan sat on a gurney. His red parka was unzipped. Steam rose off him like heat escaping as smoke. Someone checked his pulse. Someone examined his face, touching carefully around the frostburn. "You're safe." The words came firm, like an order. Ethan blinked again, slow, safe. The word felt wrong in his mouth. Hours later, or maybe longer, he couldn't tell, Ethan was moved again. Lower, less wind, less white. Oxygen came easier, and still his body wouldn't stop shaking. He passed down a corridor with people watching, some with phones out, others with hollow eyes. No one spoke to him directly. He was the man who came back. That was enough to build silence around him. When he finally reached a place where he could lie down, he didn't really sleep. His body closed its eyes, then opened them again. The rotor was still in his head. The dry crack of the fracture still existed as a sound that wouldn't stop. The next day they put him on a flight. The sequence blurred. Wheelchair, blanket, hands guiding him, doors opening and closing. Airport, lights, people. The world he returned to had colors and shapes, but he still carried Everest's white stuck inside him. When the plane landed in the United States, the door opened and a different kind of air rolled in. Not the thin air of Everest, not the metallic air of the helicopter. Ordinary air. Air people breathed without thinking. And that felt absurd. Ethan stepped down slowly. A new coat was placed over his shoulders, but his body still felt cold. The cold inside. Someone was waiting, not a crowd. A small group. A woman crying with both hands over her mouth. A man with a hard face. An embrace that came fast and tight. Ethan took the hug like his body was made of wood. His arms took a second to respond, then they closed, slowly. No one asked, what was it like? No one could. What existed were eyes fixed on him, like they needed proof he was real. In the days that followed, the official questions came. Reports, people who wanted to understand. Ethan answered in short sentences when he answered at all. He gave names, approximate times. He said avalanche. He said whiteout. He said rope. He never said more than necessary, and even when no one asked, his body kept replaying the mountain. At night, he woke with his throat locked like he was breathing through a mask. Sometimes he got out of bed and stood in the dark with his hands on his hips, trying to understand why the floor didn't move, why there wasn't wind at the window screaming like a siren, why the silence of a house was so different from the silence of Everest. One day, he opened a box with the gear that came back, the red parka folded, the harness, a carabiner scored with scratches, the rope, part of it, still rigid in places like the ice had turned into solid memory. Ethan held the rope in both hands. His fingers tightened. He pulled, the way he'd pulled in the snow. Nothing happened, of course, but the motion made his chest rise and fall faster. He dropped the rope onto the table and stood there. His face stayed hard, but his shoulders shook for 1 second. He lifted a hand to his short beard and felt his skin. What came back with him wasn't just a body. It was the sound of the crack. It was the white roar. It was the moment the rope snapped tight like a whip. It was the last time he saw Maya's navy, Cole's grey, Grant's black. And the last image, always repeating, was the same. 3 dark points in the white, not moving anymore. Weeks later, he was called to a small ceremony. 3 families, 3 photographs, 3 empty chairs nobody could look at for long. Ethan arrived in a simple coat, no red parka. His face still carried marks from the cold, small darker patches. Skin changed. He walked slowly to the front. There was no long speech. He didn't have a voice for that. When it was his turn, Ethan stood in front of everyone, hands clasped, fingers squeezing each other. He took one breath, then another. And he spoke. They were strong. The words came out short. He swallowed hard. Grant. Kept us together. Maya. Never let go of the rope. Cole. Kept the pace even with the weight on his back. He stopped. The silence in that room was different from Everest, but it was still silence. A silence made of people. Ethan continued, struggling. I came back because rescue found me, not because I did something better. The mountain chose, and I just kept moving. He lowered his head for a moment, then lifted it again. I'm sorry. There was nothing else to say. Afterward, outside, he stood alone for a few minutes. The wind there was ordinary wind. It moved through trees. It didn't scream. It didn't cut. It didn't threaten. Ethan looked up at a clean sky. Blue. Wide. No fog. But he still heard the rotor. He still saw the absolute white. And he still felt the rope in his hand. He took a deep breath and the air came in far too easily. He closed his eyes and let it out, slowly. When he opened them, he wasn't on Everest. He was home. He was alive. But the last image that stayed with him for a long time was unavoidable. The helicopter climbing, the world shrinking, and down below, 3 dark points in the white. And no matter how far he went, no matter how much city noise surrounded him, no matter how firm and warm the ground became, one simple truth didn't change. On that mountain, 4 climbed up, tied to the same rope, and only one came back.